WCW Backstage Assault. Published by EA and released in December 2000, this was the last game WCW ever put out, as they were bought by the WWE a scant few months later. And boy, they go out on a sour note, because this game is hideous. Even more baffling, it's a sequel to WCW Mayhem, a pretty okay game. But rather than build on what worked in that game, they got rid of everything good and made the bad stuff worse. As the name implies, all the action takes place in backstage environments, so you have a wrestling game that doesn't take place in a ring. A lot of people tend to dismiss this game outright upon hearing this, and I actually think you can make a decent game around the idea, if you are creative about it. Backstage Assault is not that game. You know a game is bad when the Select a Wrestler screen sucks. A lot of the roster has to be unlocked when you first start the game, which is fine. In most games, unlocked characters will be at the bottom of the screen, or in their own section to avoid confusion. But in Backstage Assault, they're scattered everywhere. Also in other games, most of the bigger stars are usually on the first screen, which makes sense because they're the characters people most want to use. But in Backstage Assault, Hulk Hogan is on the third screen and Goldberg on the fourth. Though we're navigating through all the hidden characters, and you'll probably just end up playing as Doug Dillinger. At this point, I usually go over the unusual characters you'll find on the roster, but really, that's almost everyone in the game. Who else can you play as David Flair, Johnny the Bull, Sergeant AWOL, the Harris Brothers, Tank Abbott, Big Vito, and oh yes, Vince Russo. Sid Vicious is also in the game, notable because, well, Sid wasn't in a lot of games. He was a television mainstay, but jumped ship so many times his appearances never coincided with video game releases. The only games I could think of where he was active was Super WrestleMania for the SNES, Steel Cage Challenge for the NES, and Superstars 2 for the Game Boy. If you come up with another, well, give yourself a big Barry Horowitz pat on the back. Here's the deal. Every match is basically a Falls Count Anywhere match, and they take place in a variety of backstage areas. You start out with just the truck area, but playing through story mode will open other places like bathrooms, locker rooms, and the block, although Jerry Flynn was curiously omitted from the game's roster. There are a lot of problems here. First of all, the areas themselves aren't terribly exciting. There's not much difference between the locker room and the bathroom, except you can hit someone with a toilet. The truck area is the best, I guess, because it's pretty big and has room for maneuverability. Well, if you wander too far from your opponent, the game switches to a disorienting top-down view until you get closer. The second big problem is it cuts down greatly on match types. You can have first blood, and that's really it. There are obviously no cage or ladder match options, and sadly no kind of tag team match either. Or tornado tag option could have been chaotic fun. Would have required split screens in case your teammate wandered to another section of the area. And I guess that wasn't feasible graphically, or they just didn't want to do that. You win matches by pinfall, submission, or KO. You have the same control scheme as in Mayhem. You're really better off just grabbing an object and whacking your opponent. In other games, if you use an object a certain amount of times, you'll drop it and it'll disappear. In Backstage Assault, your object will explode. It looks embarrassingly like something out of an old Atari game. Maybe my favorite thing about the game is the flaming barrels you can whip your opponent into. They'll burst into flames and hit the ground, then get up, realize they're on fire, flail about, and flop back down. It cracks me up every time. Of course, this is when you can actually pull it off, because the controls are god-awful. Your characters move so slowly, especially when your opponent is down. They do this weird shuffle when they're around them. Also, you hit B to both grapple and pick up an object. I can't tell you the number of times I tried to initiate a grapple, and instead turn around and pick up an object, leave myself open to attack. Or I tried to grab an object and just grappled instead. The game hilariously tries to incorporate standard ring features into the backstage settings. Periodically, the game will alert you there's an aerial opportunity, meaning your opponent's down, there's a box or something you can jump off of. In the truck area, there are stacks of tires you can either send your opponent into the corner like a turnbuckle, or you can send them in, they'll rebound like they hit the ropes. I guess it's no weirder than bouncing off cables in the ring. Movesets are handed out pretty haphazardly. Everyone has a move or two that'll make you scratch your head. I swear, everyone in the game has a Northern Lights bomb, or Spike Slam as it's called here. I think it was a Body Slam by the way it's so prevalent. The biggest problem in the game is just too hard to finish off opponents. I was wrestling as Sid against Jimmy Hart, and after 3 power bombs on concrete, a dozen weapon shots, and setting him on fire twice, he was still kicking out at 2. We would have totally lost a crowd had there been one there. It's not so much difficult as it's just boring. There are 3 game modes: Exhibition, Hardcore Challenge, and Hardcore Gauntlet. Challenge is facing a bunch of random people in singles matches. Along the way you'll unlock wrestlers, areas, and moves. Gauntlet has 7 matches in a row with no break, which I've never completed. Not because it's hard, it's just one match is boring enough. If you beat the game, you get put in the Hall of Champions, which is just a fancy name for a high score listing. Graphics look terrible, especially when the wrestlers pose prior to the match. The wrestlers themselves are oddly misshapen and really don't resemble their real-life counterparts. But to their credit, EA worked proper heights into the game. Sid towers over his opponents, for example. Move animations are poor as well. There's a feature where you can have the move names appear on the screen as they're being performed, which is helpful, because I often don't know what the hell's going on. On the plus side, both Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan are in the N64 version this time.
Well, I guess it was only a matter of time before they wound up fighting in the exercise room.
A prime example, Tony, of excellent offense.
Which is funny because Heenan had been let go the month before, but hey, would you rather hear Mark Madden? They fixed the Create a Wrestler feature, and then you can pick individual moves for your wrestler, not just an established wrestler's moveset. Weirdly, when you start designing your Create a Wrestler's appearance, you don't start with a blank template. Instead, you choose an existing wrestler and alter their appearance from there. Whatever. The game is just a disaster. It's ugly and no fun to play at all. You'd think there would be more excitement, but just like latter-day WCW, the overuse of stipulation matches burns out the audience. And that way, the game makes a pretty fitting tribute. I can't take these crappy WCW games anymore. I still have Thunder to go. Well, we're putting that one off. I need a break, something different, something new. Oh, nuts. Well, that's next time, so till then, thanks for watching. And remember,
ashes to ashes and back to dust. And before I go, believe